December 25, 2025, Southern Caribbean Sea. While most of the world was focused on the holidays, 3 Venezuelan warships made their move. At 3:41 p.m. local time, radar operators aboard a U.S. Navy ship saw it happen in real time. 3 surface contacts, previously maintaining parallel tracks, altered course almost simultaneously. Their headings bent inward, speed increased, formation tightened. This was not coincidence. It was Christmas Day, a moment when crews rotate lighter watch sections, when attention across much of the world is pulled elsewhere, and Venezuela knew it. Inside the Combat Information Center, the update was brief and precise. 3 Venezuelan naval vessels, coordinated course change, closing distance. No alarm bells, no raised voices, just confirmation, because intent at sea isn't declared with words. It's declared with movement. The 3 ships were not passing by. They were not shadowing at a safe distance. They were driving straight in on the bridge. The American response was immediate and restrained. No turn away, no speed change, no aggressive maneuver. The U.S. Navy ship held course. That choice mattered. In international waters, predictability is leverage. The first ship to flinch hands control of the situation to the other side. The captain understood that. So did the Venezuelan commanders, watching their own plots. The range continued to close. 24 nautical miles. 22:20. The Venezuelan ships transmitted nothing. No AIS, no bridge-to-bridge calls, no justification. Just steel hulls moving with purpose. The first hail went out. Venezuelan naval vessels. This is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. State your intentions. Silence. The ships kept coming. The second hail followed, this time in Spanish. You are conducting unsafe maneuvering. Alter course immediately. Still nothing. By now, there was no room left for misunderstanding. 3 warships, coordinated silence, direct approach on a U.S. Navy ship during a global holiday window. This was not poor seamanship. This was a test, timed carefully. Inside the CIC, sensors came online quietly. Long-range optics locked onto the approaching hulls. Every bearing change, every knot gained, every second of silence was logged and time-stamped. The American ship still did not deviate. No dramatics, no posturing, just discipline. Because in moments like this, especially when the other side expects distraction, the most dangerous response isn't panic. It's calm. And as the Venezuelan warships continued their approach on December 25th, one thing became clear to everyone watching the screens. This wasn't about navigation. It was about who would blink first. The closing distance was not aggressive in appearance, but it was relentless in intent. 20 nautical miles, then 19, then 18. On the surface, nothing dramatic happened. No sudden acceleration, no erratic turns. Just 3 Venezuelan warships maintaining steady speed while subtly tightening their approach geometry. It was careful, controlled, the kind of maneuver designed to look deniable until it wasn't. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical picture sharpened. The lead Venezuelan ship stayed on a direct intercept course. The other 2 drifted outward by a few degrees, widening laterally while maintaining forward pressure. To civilian traffic, it would have meant nothing. To a naval watch team, it meant everything. They were applying lateral constraint, not an encirclement. Not yet, but a setup that reduced maneuvering space and forced the U.S. Navy ship into a narrow decision window. The American response did not change. Course steady, speed steady, posture neutral. That restraint was deliberate. In international waters, every deviation invites interpretation. A turn away could be framed as retreat. A speed increase could be framed as provocation. The safest position legally and tactically was to do neither. The Venezuelan ships continued closing 17 nautical miles. No radio traffic, no courtesy call, no navigational explanation. The silence itself had become a signal. The officer of the deck ordered another hail. Venezuelan naval vessels, you are closing distance on a United States Navy ship. Recommend immediate course alteration to avoid unsafe conditions. Static answered back inside the CIC. The closest point of approach recalculated again. CPA now 5. 2 nautical miles. That number triggered quiet attention across the watch floor. Below 5 miles, intent becomes difficult to disguise. Below 3, it becomes undeniable. Electronic support measures began logging passively. Not jamming, not warning, just listening. Radar sweeps from the Venezuelan ships appeared intermittently. Low-power surface search mode. They were watching, measuring, calibrating. Long-range optics zoomed further. Deck activity was now clearly visible. Sailors moved topside, helmets on. Several figures clustered near the forward gun mounts. No weapons were manned, but no one was pretending this was routine either. The captain observed silently. He had seen this before. Not in these waters, not on this date, but in the pattern itself. Gray zone pressure, close enough to provoke, controlled enough to deny. 16 nautical miles. The Venezuelan lead increased speed slightly, just 2 knots. The other 2 followed moments later. It was subtle, but it shortened the timeline. CP now 4. 1 nautical miles, CIC reported. At this range, the encounter was no longer abstract. If either side misjudged speed or angle, the margin for error would collapse quickly, and everyone in the room understood that December 25th was not a coincidence. Holiday watch rotations, reduced global attention, a calculated window. The U.S. Navy ship did not react to the speed increase. Instead, the captain issued a quiet order. Shift to heightened awareness. Bring additional sensors online. No alarms sounded. No announcements were made. The ship remained outwardly unchanged while inwardly preparing. On the flight deck, the helicopter detachment moved without urgency, but without delay. Power connected, systems warming, crew strapping in. Not a launch order yet, but readiness was no longer theoretical. Inside the CIC, watch standards tracked every bearing change with near-surgical precision. The Venezuelan ships continued to hold formation, still closing, still silent. CPA now 3. 6 nautical miles. That number settled heavily across the space. Below 3 miles, explanations disappear. Below 3 miles, history gets written fast. Still, the American ship held its line. This was not stubbornness. This was doctrine, because the objective was not to win a confrontation. It was to force the other side to make the next move in full view of the record. The pressure had been applied. The question now was whether Venezuela would push further or realize just how visible their gamble had become. By the time the range fell below 3 nautical miles, the encounter had crossed into a different category. At this distance, intent could no longer be dismissed as coincidence or poor navigation. Every bearing change was deliberate. Every knot of speed carried consequence, and every second was being recorded. Inside the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere was quiet but compressed. Watchstanders spoke in short, precise updates, their eyes fixed on plots and optical feeds. CPA now 2. 9 nautical miles, closing. The captain listened without comment. He didn't need more information. He needed the right moment. In modern naval operations, response isn't about speed, it's about timing. The Venezuelan ships held their formation. The lead vessel remained on a near-direct intercept course, while the 2 flanking ships continued to apply lateral pressure, just enough to narrow maneuvering space, without triggering an automatic escalation. It was pressure by design. The captain made his decision. Execute presence measures, he said calmly. The words were simple. Their implications were not. Inside the CIC, the shift was immediate but controlled. Active sensors were brought online. Fire control quality tracking remained inhibited, but high-resolution optics locked firmly onto the lead Venezuelan ship. Electronic warfare systems stayed silent, ready, but deliberately unused. This was not about threatening force. It was about removing doubt. On the flight deck, the helicopter crew received the order they had anticipated. Engine spooled, rotors turned. The aircraft lifted smoothly into the air, climbing just enough to clear the ship before settling into a low-controlled orbit off the starboard side. No dramatic ascent, no aggressive dive, just a visible signal. From above, the helicopter's sensor suite activated fully. Infrared imagery cut through distance and glare. Electro-optical zoom delivered a clear picture of deck activity aboard the Venezuelan ships. Heat signatures, movement patterns, command positions, Everything was now captured, time-stamped and geolocated. The helicopter closed laterally, maintaining a professional offset, close enough to be unmistakable, far enough to remain non-provocative. Then came the next step. A green laser designator activated, steady and precise, painting the bridge windows of the lead Venezuelan ship. Non-lethal, harmless, but impossible to misinterpret. Inside the Venezuelan bridge, the effect was immediate. On the helicopter's feed, crew members froze briefly, then moved with purpose. One sailor raised binoculars. Another stepped back toward the interior. The bridge windows reflected the laser clearly. At the same moment, the helicopter transmitted on open maritime frequency. Venezuelan naval vessel. This is a United States Navy aircraft. You are conducting unsafe maneuvering in international waters. Your actions are being recorded. Alter course immediately. The message was repeated in Spanish. This time, the response did not come over the radio. It came through motion on the CIC display. A subtle but critical change appeared. Contact reducing speed. 26 knots dropped to 24, then to 22. The flanking Venezuelan ships followed seconds later, their wakes shortening as engine output eased. The tight pressure geometry began to relax, angles widening just enough to break the intercept posture. No sudden turns, no abrupt retreat, just a measured step back. The helicopter held its position, sensors locked, laser steady. The aircraft did not chase. It did not crowd. It simply remained, watching, recording, waiting. At 2.7 nautical miles, the lead Venezuelan ship altered course slightly, only a few degrees, but it was enough. It was no longer on a direct intercept path. Inside the CIC, the update came quietly. Contact is no longer driving CPA lower. That was the moment. The challenge had peaked and broken. The helicopter completed one final pass, wide and deliberate, ensuring clear visual confirmation of the changed posture. Then it turned back toward the ship, climbing smoothly and returning to the flight deck. Rotor slowed, wheels touched down. The aircraft was secured on the surface. The U.S. Navy ship and never changed course, never changed speed. The Venezuelan warships remained present on radar, still within sight, but no longer closing. Their movement had shifted from pressure to observation. No weapons were raised, no warnings fired, no escalation triggered. Yet the outcome was decisive. The U.S. Navy had not forced compliance through threat. It had forced clarity through presence. It had drawn a line quietly, legally, and with every action documented. In modern naval confrontations, this is how control is asserted. Not by the first shot, but by the first side that chooses not to blink and makes the other side realize it has been seen. Inside the Combat Information Center, the first indicator wasn't visual. It was mathematical. CPA increase. That single update confirmed what everyone was already sensing. The geometry had shifted. The interiors on the radar display, the lead Venezuelan ship's track, showed a gradual divergence, just a few degrees off the U.S. Navy ship's heading, but enough to change the outcome. The two flanking vessels mirrored the adjustment, widening their spacing and allowing the lateral pressure to dissolve. Speed told the rest of the story. The lead ship dropped below 20 knots, then 19, then settled into a steady transit pace. The other two followed suit on the optical feeds. Topside activity changed as well. Sailors who had been positioned near the forward gun mounts stepped back. Helmets came off. Some crew members leaned against railings, posture relaxed. The body language was unmistakable. The decision had been made. On the bridge of the U.S. Navy ship, there was no visible reaction, no orders to pursue, no shift to a more aggressive stance. The ship continued straight ahead, engines holding a constant rhythm, as if the encounter had never occurred. That restraint was not accidental. In these moments, overreaction can undo everything. The objective was never to embarrass the other side. It was to end the challenge, without creating a new one. Inside the CIC, threat assessments were quietly downgraded. Sensors remained active, but the intensity eased. The closest point of approach continued to widen, for nautical miles. Then 5. The Venezuelan ships remained present, still shadowing at a distance, but their posture had changed fundamentally. They were no longer dictating terms. They were reacting, and that distinction mattered. The helicopter footage was already being processed and archived, every frame aligned with radar data and navigation logs. If the encounter were ever questioned, the record would speak for itself. The U.S. Navy ship had maintained lawful transit. The Venezuelan ships had approached deliberately, and then, after clear signaling, they had chosen to back off. No interpretation required. Out on deck, sailors resumed their routines. There were no announcements, no sense of relief broadcast over the ship systems. Professionalism demanded that the watch continue as if nothing extraordinary had happened, because in a way nothing had. Encounters like this are becoming part of the new normal. Navies operate closer than ever. Political messages are sent through movement instead of statements. Pressure is applied quietly, then withdrawn just as quietly. What made this moment significant wasn't how it began, but how it ended. No weapons were involved. No lines were crossed. No one lost control. The Venezuelan Navy had tested the boundary. The U.S. Navy had responded without escalation. And when faced with calm resolve instead of reaction, the pressure had broken on its own. By the time the range opened beyond 8 nautical miles, the encounter was effectively over. The Venezuelan ships faded toward the edge of the tactical picture, still visible, still watching, but no longer a factor. The sea returned to its earlier stillness. The horizon remained unchanged. But for those who had been watching the plots, reading the numbers, and measuring every second, the lesson was clear. At sea, strength is not always loud. Sometimes it's measured in degrees of heading, knots of speed, and the confidence to hold your course when someone else expects you to flinch. And on December 25, 2025, that confidence had ended the challenge without a single shot fired. Vietnam Tip No Phun for Quang Sondi 2 Part 5. Why this encounter mattered. By the time the distance opened beyond 10 nautical miles, the confrontation had already been decided. The 3 Venezuelan warships were still present on radar, but they no longer controlled the encounter. Their tracks ran parallel now, no longer intersecting. What had begun as a coordinated approach had ended as distant observation. To anyone outside the Navy, it might have looked like nothing happened. No weapons fired, no alarm sounded, no dramatic maneuvers captured on camera. But in modern maritime operations, outcomes are rarely defined by explosions. They are defined by who controls escalation and who is forced to stop. On December 25, 2025, Venezuela tested a familiar assumption that timing could create opportunity. A global holiday, reduced attention, the expectation that a U.S. Navy ship would prioritize avoidance over resolve. That assumption was wrong. The American response was not aggressive. It did not rely on threats or firepower. It relied on procedure, documentation, and restraint applied with precision. Every movement had been logged, every bearing change recorded, every second preserved across radar, optical, and flight data. If the encounter were ever questioned, there would be no debate about who acted lawfully and who initiated pressure. This matters because these incidents are no longer isolated. Across the world's oceans, navies are operating in what strategists call the gray zone, not peace, not war. A space where pressure is applied without crossing thresholds that trigger open conflict. In this environment, the goal isn't to destroy the opponent. It's to force them into a decision they can't justify. That's exactly what happened here. Venezuela could have continued closing. It could have forced a tighter encounter. It could have escalated. But doing so would have meant owning the consequences legally, politically, and militarily. Instead, it backed down. The U.S. Navy didn't win by overpowering its opponent. It won by making escalation unnecessary and indefensible, by holding course, maintaining professionalism, and refusing to hand the narrative to the other side. This approach sends a message far beyond the Caribbean. It signals that international waters remain governed by law, not intimidation, that timing and distraction do not create exceptions, and that attempts to apply pressure without accountability will be met with calm resolve, not reaction. Inside the ship, the watch continued as scheduled. Crews rotated. Logs were finalized. The helicopter detachment completed post-flight checks. The mission never changed because it never needed to. Transit, presence, stability. This is what maritime power looks like in the 21st century. Not dominance for spectacle, Not restraint out of fear, but control rooted in discipline. The next encounter may not happen on a holiday. It may not involve the same players, but the pattern will be familiar. Close approach, silence, pressure, and a moment where someone has to decide whether to push or pull back. The question is not whether these challenges will continue. They will. The question is how they are answered. Should the United States respond more aggressively to challenges at sea? Or is restraint the smarter weapon in a world where every move is recorded, replayed, and judged? Let us know what you think in the comments. If you found this breakdown valuable, subscribe for more real-world naval encounters analyzed through modern doctrine and real operational behavior. And if you want to support the channel directly, consider joining the fleet. Because out here, far from headlines and holiday celebrations, the most important decisions are often made quietly. One course line, one heading change, and one moment of resolve at a time.